How well does Azure Static Web Apps support Next.js? I've built an app that tests 12 of the most important features of Next.js, and I want to put Azure Static Web Apps to the test. There's been a recent update to Azure Static Web Apps that's supposed to have better support for Next.js. So I thought this would be a great first platform to test against the Next.js Every Feature app. A quick overview of the app again. This is a pages-based architecture Next.js app built with Next.js 13. Spoiler alert, I did test Next.js 14 on Azure Static Web Apps, and that wasn't supported due to node issues. So I'm going to be testing Next.js 13 on Azure Static Web Apps and seeing how it performs. And I'm going to be just doing this as an out-of-the-box deployment to Azure Static Web Apps. I don't want to have to set up any other external things or third-party services. This is just me deploying straight to Azure Static Web Apps with all of their defaults. Here's the documentation that I've been following. Deploy hybrid Next.js on Azure Static Web Apps. And this is in preview, so take that in mind that this is going to change and that the support will probably be getting even better. But you can see quite recently, they've done a big update to the documentation and to what sort of support they have for Next.js. So I use this documentation to deploy to the Azure portal, and I'm not super familiar with Azure overall. I've used AWS quite a bit more, but I didn't have too hard of a time deploying this to Azure. But for this tutorial, I don't want to go through the deployment process. I want to go straight to testing what features of Next.js work in Azure Static Web Apps. So let's take a look at my deployed resource. Inside of the Azure portal, I have my deployed resource. This is my Azure Host Check. This is the Host Check Next.js app that I have on GitHub deployed to Azure Static Web Apps. This is the main branch. If you do check out the GitHub repo, please give it a star in the top right corner. And if you're already here in the video, please leave it a like and subscribe for future content just like this, where I test other platforms. If you see Next.js features that I'm not testing that you need tested, please leave a comment down below what features you need tested or other platforms you want tested as well. Back to our Azure resource. My one caveat that I wish I could see inside of here to improve the developer experience was a little bit more on the status. Right now, the status is ready, which is perfect. It means that my app has been deployed. During the deployment, during the build phase, I'd like a little bit more information on maybe how long the build is taking, the status of the build. One time my build failed, and instead of saying status like failed, it just said waiting for deployment for half an hour. It kept just saying waiting for deployment. I wasn't sure what was wrong, but I did find out finally that GitHub action runs up here is what you need to check on to see the deployments and see how they're doing inside of your application. Right now I have 2 green deployments, which is great to see, but I didn't get that feedback very easily from the deployments inside of these GitHub actions to what the status was in the Azure portal. But enough about that. We were here for what features of Next.js work in Azure Static Web Apps in the pages-based architecture of Next.js. Let's point our Cypress tests at this deployed URL so that we can see what our results are for tests. After copying the URL, I want to use that inside of my Cypress config. So I have the yellow island URL here that Azure Static Web Apps created for me. Then I will open up Cypress and see what that is. So npm run Cypress open brings up my Cypress console or Cypress window. EDE testing. We're doing this in Chrome. I have my 12 specs right here that I want to run. So I can run all 12 specs. This is going to run. We want to make sure against the URL that it's doing that yellow island. You can see, yes, it is. So it's running through, doing these automated tests, coming back with results. And let's let this run. So far, so good. And great. We're actually seeing green check marks across the board for Next.js pages architecture support in Azure Static Web Apps. These are the 12 most common important features that I'm seeing inside of Next.js. So again, if you have other features that you want tested or think that need to be tested, please leave those in the comments below. But I'm actually really happy to see that Azure Static Web Apps has great support for at least Next.js 13 based apps running pages architecture. API route support, Git server-side props, edge runtime, subpath initialization. I'll have these listed on the screen, but this is great news to see that there's great support out in the most recent version of Azure Static Web Apps. But I'm happy to see that they're really putting in the effort to support Next.js in Azure. If you found this video helpful, please leave it a like and subscribe for more content. I'm going to be testing out more hosting providers, especially the ones that you guys post in the comments below. But let's check out AWS Amplify, Cloudflare Pages, a new one that I've heard, Render. I think that's a new one that's new to me at least. To keep up with all the updates, please subscribe. Thanks.